Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2017, directed by Mike Flanagan, and this film is called Gerald's Game. So Gerald's Game is about a married couple. They've gone through a lot of problems in their lives, and so the husband named Gerald wants to rejuvenate their marriage. So he decides to go to a very remote location, away from everybody else, to try and have a little bit of private time, and hopefully this is going to be something that they need. So when they get to the house, Gerald is a little bit kinky, and he wants to have a bit of a kinky sexual game by handcuffing his wife to a bed and playing out a fantasy of his. But this fantasy starts to creep out the wife. She says, please stop it, and so an argument ensues that results in Gerald having a heart attack and dying. So the ultimate problem for the woman is that she's still handcuffed to the bed, she can't get to the keys, and she realizes that no one is going to help her. So she's going to have to face some demons in order to try and get out of this, otherwise she is facing grave consequences. So not only is she going to have to face some complications that are going to arise in her present day situation, she's actually going to be forced to confront the demons that have traumatized her in her past. So whether or not she can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Gerald's Game. This is a Stephen King adaptation, and a lot of people have actually been going on about this film as how faithful it is to the source material. Now I haven't actually read the novel, which is the case with a lot of Stephen King adaptations. I haven't actually read the novel, so I can only really compare it based on what I see in a film. So if you've read the novel and you want to say how faithful it is, or whether or not the novel is better, then please feel free. But for me, I'm just judging it based on what I see in a film. And what I saw in the film was an adaptation that isn't quite as good as the more memorable Stephen King adaptations, but it's still a worthwhile film because it is very interesting. Now this is ultimately a situational horror film, in that she's cuffed to the bed, and how's she going to get out of this predicament is that there's some very horrific situations that happen. There's a very horrific graphic scene of gore that is a little bit later in the film that really shocked me, and it really symbolized what this woman was going through. And that's what I think the best thing about this film is, that it has a double meaning, is that this woman is handcuffed to the bed, but that's also what she's been going through her whole life. She's been confined by people that have influenced her in a very negative way, and this is something that happens to a lot of people out there. So unfortunately in society there are people that will prey upon vulnerable people, and this is the symbolization of her being shackled to the bed, is that she's being confined by the demons of her past. In order to try and get out of these shackles, she's going to have to confront those demons. So this is a movie about psychological tension. It's about psychological build, and basically becoming a better person as a result of that, and being forced to face your demons. That no matter how many times you run away from your demons, eventually you're going to be forced to face them. And because she's shackled, now she's going to have to face them, and this is very troubling for her, and it's also going to be very troubling for the audience, as I thought it was very interesting in the way it told its story through flashbacks, and also the way that the characters involve themselves. I'm not going to tell you how Mike Flanagan actually does this, but I thought it was very interesting, is that you get an insight into this woman's mind, in that if it was just her for an hour and 40 minutes, it would have been boring, because she wouldn't be able to talk, and she wouldn't be able to convey her, basically portray her thoughts. And so because of the very interesting way that Mike Flanagan actually tells this story, you do get an insight into this very troubled soul, and as a result of that you actually get a lot of sympathy for her. So it's one of those situations, like horror films, where you think to yourself, what would I do in a similar circumstance? How far are you willing to go to break those confines, to break those shackles, in order to better yourself as a person? On top of that, you've also got some fairly handy horror set pieces. There's a few set pieces involving a dog that I thought was very, very creepy, and there's also a set piece of something in the corner of the room that I thought was very, very freaky, but once again a symbolic meaning of what this character was going through. So the cinematography is excellent. If you like the movie Hush, you're going to like the way that this movie looks. So it's a very similar way, in that it's very colourful, but at the same time very eerie. When the nightfall approaches, I thought it was taking on a different world, and this is where the horror aspect really starts to kick in. There are some very shocking moments, as I said, so it does complement those of a more hardened sort of horror viewer, but I wouldn't say it's a straight out horror film. I would just say it's a psychological kind of drama of a survival type of horror of a woman trying to get the better of her current situation, but at the same time a double meaning of something so much more. So that was all very good, and I thought the acting from the main character especially was fantastic, and also Gerald the husband. He actually starts to expand as a character, and I thought, okay, this is actually getting a little bit weird and very uncomfortable. And so there are some very provocative themes in this film that I think will definitely challenge an audience, and as I said, it will make you think about it, and because you think about it, you do get a lot of sympathetic quality towards the main character involved. So that was all very good, and I thought the runtime, surprisingly for a movie that does rely a lot on talking, it never really gets boring. But unfortunately, the worst thing, I wouldn't say the worst thing, but the biggest problem that Gerald's Game has is that it doesn't break the confines of just a movie for Netflix. Now, this is a Netflix original, and it feels like a Netflix original. It feels like a movie that really wouldn't blow away cinema audiences. It's a movie that doesn't really have that X factor to carry it over the line. It doesn't really match up to films such as Misery and The Shining and Pet Sematary, because it just doesn't have that oomph. I thought there was a little bit of anticlimactic material in this film, and it didn't really end on a way that I really wanted it to. As I said, there's some shocking moments towards the end that I think were really shock or take an audience by surprise, but unfortunately right at the end of the film it just meanders along, and I didn't really think it complemented some of the really great moments that this film has. So there's some great moments, but doesn't really equal into a great film, and that is ultimately a shame, because I thought it did have enough potential to actually elevate it to that really good Stephen King adaptation. Mike Flanagan is a fantastic director, but I thought that there's a lot of exposition right at the end of the film that I didn't think was really necessary. Now, as I said, I don't know how the novel finishes, but this movie finishes in a way where it's just documenting everything that's going on. And I thought it would have been a little bit better and a little bit creepier if it actually left it to your imagination a little bit more. And so that's something I didn't like. And then you've got some aspects, especially the dog in this film. I thought the dog actually could have been elevated and expanded into something so much more, but I thought that was a little bit of an anticlimax as well. So there are moments that are very good, but unfortunately it just doesn't have that punch that would actually make it one of the great Stephen King adaptations. But it's definitely a movie, if you're on Netflix and you need something to watch, Gerald's Game is a good way to spend an hour and 40 odd minutes, but it's nothing that is going to really set the world alight. So overall for Gerald's Game, going to give this one 3 stars. Still go out there and see it. I found it somewhat enjoyable. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.